The last time I saw my sister standing in a line, she was 7 years old, waiting for the school bus on a January morning in Sudbury. She had her red mittens and her gap-toothed smile, and she waved at me like I was the most important person in the world. That was 53 years ago. The next time I saw her standing in a line, she was 61 years old, holding a paper cup of soup with both hands, her coat too thin for a November afternoon in Halifax, and she didn't see me at all. My name is Margaret, and I am 64 years old. I worked 31 years as a family law paralegal in Halifax before I retired 18 months ago. My husband passed 8 years back, and after that it was just me, my cat Gerald, and the house on Roby Street that I have no intention of ever leaving. I tell you this so you understand. I am not a woman who misses things. I read documents for a living. I notice details. I have spent decades watching people lose everything because they trusted the wrong person and ignored the signs. I missed every single sign with my sister. Her name is Patricia, but nobody has called her that since 1987. She is Patty to everyone who loves her. She is 3 years younger than me, the kind of woman who remembers every birthday, who makes her own Christmas cards, who once drove 4 hours in a snowstorm because a friend called crying at midnight. She taught elementary school for 34 years in Dartmouth, just across the bridge from where I live. She retired 2 years before me, and I remember thinking how lucky we were. 2 sisters, both settled, both close, finally with time to just be together. I should have known something was wrong. Looking back now, I can count at least 11 moments where I should have known. But when you love someone, you accept the explanations. You don't push. You don't want to be the person who makes everything worse. The man she married was named Robert. She met him at 63, through one of those dating apps her colleague convinced her to try. She called me the night after their first date, and I could hear it in her voice, that particular kind of happiness that sounds almost like relief. She had been alone for 12 years after her first marriage ended. She had been so careful, so patient. She deserved this, I thought. She had earned this. Robert was 67, recently retired from what he described as a career in private investment consulting. He had a lovely house in Bedford, a silver car that was always clean, and a way of speaking about money that made him sound like he understood it better than most people understand their own names. He was not flashy, he was steady. He remembered details: what I took in my coffee, that I preferred to sit near the window in restaurants, that my late husband had been a carpenter. He seemed like a man who paid attention. Patty married him 14 months after they met. I was her witness at the small ceremony at a registry office in Dartmouth. She wore a cream blazer and carried a bunch of pale yellow tulips she picked up herself from the market that morning. She looked happy in a way I hadn't seen in years. Robert smiled at her like she was something he'd been looking for a long time. I trusted him because she trusted him. I trusted him because he seemed solid. I trusted him because, honestly, I wanted her to have this. I wanted it badly enough that I let myself be charmed. The first thing I noticed and excused was that Patty stopped suggesting we meet for lunch as often. We had a standing Tuesday arrangement, alternating who drove across the bridge. It just quietly became every other Tuesday, and then once a month. She always had a reason. Robert had a medical appointment and she wanted to go with him. Her back was bothering her. She was repainting the spare room. Each reason was completely ordinary. I told myself this was what happened when a person found a partner after years alone. You restructure. You're allowed. The second thing I noticed was that she sounded tired on the phone. Not sad, just worn in a way I couldn't explain. When I asked her directly, she laughed it off, said she wasn't sleeping well, said she'd been having headaches, said the doctor thought it might be her blood pressure medication needing adjustment. I had no reason not to believe her. She'd had blood pressure issues for years. The third thing was the money comment. We were at a pharmacy together picking up her prescription refill, and when she reached for her wallet, I noticed her hands hesitate before she tapped her card. It was such a small thing, such a fast thing. But I saw it a checking motion, like she was calculating. Patty had a full teacher's pension from the Nova Scotia Teachers Union. I knew approximately what she received each month because we had talked about retirement planning for years. She had no mortgage. She had no children. She should not have been doing arithmetic at a pharmacy counter for a prescription refill. I asked her about it in the car. I said lightly, "Just checking everything okay with the finances?" She said Robert had suggested they consolidate their accounts to simplify things now that they were married. She said he was handling most of it, which was actually a relief because she had never really liked dealing with paperwork anyway. She said it with a small laugh, like this was a funny quirk about herself. Like it was nothing. I didn't push. I told myself I was being a suspicious old woman. I told myself I was projecting because of all the cases I'd read in 30 years of family law. I told myself my sister was a grown adult, and I had no business making her feel scrutinized in her own marriage. I wish every day that I had pushed. I didn't hear from her for almost 6 weeks after that. She replied to my texts briefly fine. Busy, talk soon, a few emojis. When I called, she picked up but always sounded distracted and cut things short. Robert was always there, I realized. Every time I called, I could hear him somewhere in the background. Not close. Just present. I drove to her house one Tuesday without calling ahead. I am not a person who does this. I was raised to phone first. Always phone first, but something had been sitting in my chest for weeks like a stone I couldn't swallow. And that morning I woke up at 5:30 and I thought, I am going to see my sister today. She answered the door in a house address, which Patty never wore in the middle of the day. She looked thin. Not sick thin, not alarming, but the kind of thin that comes from not eating properly for a few months. Her hair needed a cut. There was a quality to her eyes that I can only describe as dimmed, like the person looking out through them was further back than usual. She let me in. Robert was not home. I made tea. I didn't say anything for a while. I just made the tea and I sat across from her at the kitchen table and I waited, and after about 10 minutes, she started to cry. Quietly, with her hands around her mug, not looking at me. She talked for almost 2 hours. She told me that 8 months into their marriage, Robert had suggested they refinance her condominium, her condo, the one she'd owned outright for 11 years, the one she bought with her own savings from 34 years of teaching. He said the equity could be better used as investment capital. He said he had a trusted financial advisor who could double the return in a low-risk portfolio. He said her money was just sitting there doing nothing. He said it so calmly, so logically, so patiently, that she signed the paperwork without reading through it entirely, because she trusted him, and because he made her feel slightly embarrassed that she didn't understand the investment language, and she didn't want to seem foolish. The condo was remortgaged for $240,000. The money went into an account Robert controlled. Patty was told it was being managed. She believed him for 4 months until she asked to see a statement, and he handed her a single printed page with numbers that meant nothing to her. When she asked for clarification, he spent 45 minutes explaining it in ways that left her more confused than before, and when she said she still didn't fully understand, he sighed in a way that was not angry, but somehow worse than angry, patient, disappointed, like a teacher sighing at a student who keeps missing the obvious, and he said, "Patty, this is exactly why you needed someone to handle this for you." She told me about the credit cards. There were 3 she hadn't known existed, opened in her name, using her SIN number, her date of birth, her previous address. The balances totaled just under $60,000. Charges at businesses she had never visited, in cities she had never been to. When she found the statements accidentally, in a folder she opened looking for her own dental records, and confronted Robert, he told her she must be confused. He said she had been having memory problems lately. He said he had mentioned these accounts to her multiple times and she had obviously forgotten. He said gently that he was worried about her. He said her memory had seemed off for months. He suggested she make an appointment with her doctor. She believed him. That is the part that is hardest to explain to someone who has never experienced it. She believed him because by that point she had been inside his version of reality for long enough that her own memory felt unreliable. He had been doing this slowly, deliberately, casually, contradicting small things she was certain of, expressing gentle concern about things she said, asking, "Are you sure?" just often enough to make her stop being sure of anything. By the time she found those credit card statements, she had already been taught to doubt herself. She went to her doctor. She asked to be tested for early cognitive decline. The doctor found nothing wrong. Robert told her the doctor had missed something. He said he would look into a specialist. She also told me he had suggested, twice, in conversations she initially thought were hypothetical, that if she were to become incapacitated in some way, He would of course need full legal power over her financial affairs. He had mentioned it so casually, in such a caring tone, that she hadn't registered it as a threat until she was sitting at my kitchen table months later, recounting it, and she saw my face. By the time she was telling me all of this, the condo had been listed for sale. Robert had told her it made more financial sense to sell outright and move into his Bedford house permanently. He had told her the proceeds would go toward their shared investment account. He had told her this was the smart move. He had told her this was what people who understood money did. She had signed the listing agreement. She had not seen a cent of her pension in 4 months. He had told her the transfers were delayed due to a banking administrative issue that he was sorting out. She had believed him and waited. I sat across from my sister and I looked at her and I thought about 31 years of reading documents about exactly this financial abuse, identity fraud, coercive control, elder financial exploitation. And I thought about how many times I had sat with a lawyer and reviewed cases where intelligent, careful, loving women had been completely dismantled by a person they trusted, and how every single time I had thought, in the smallest, most shameful corner of my mind, how could they not have seen it? I understood now how they had not seen it. I told Patty to stay exactly where she was. I told her not to sign anything else. I told her not to tell Robert that she had spoken to me. I told her I was going to help her and that I needed her to trust me for a little while longer. Then I went home and I made some phone calls. The first call was to a colleague I had worked with for 18 years, a family law lawyer named Claire who now specialized in elder financial abuse cases. I told Claire everything Patty had told me. Claire was very quiet for a moment and then she said, "Margaret, this is textbook, every element of it." The second call was to Equifax. I helped Patty request her full credit report. When it arrived, the 3 unauthorized credit cards were there exactly as she had described. There were also 2 additional inquiries she had not known about, one from a company I did not recognize, one that appeared to be a secondary credit card application that had been declined. The third call was to the Nova Scotia Teachers' Pension Plan. With Patty's permission and her member information, I helped her inquire about her pension payments. The woman we spoke with confirmed that the direct deposit information on Patty's account had been updated 8 months ago. The payments were going into an account that was not Patty's personal account. I need you to understand what it felt like to hear that. The pension Patty had earned over 34 years of teaching children to read, 34 years of report cards and winter concerts and parent-teacher nights and scraped knees at recess had been redirected. 8 months of payments. Gone into an account she did not control. I have dealt with a lot of difficult information in my professional life. I did not cry at work in 31 years. I cried that evening in my kitchen, sitting at my table with the phone in my hand and Gerald on my lap, and then I dried my face and I got back to work. Claire referred us to a fraud lawyer named Dennis who had handled a number of similar cases in Nova Scotia. Dennis reviewed everything and confirmed that Patty was looking at identity theft, fraud over $5,000, breach of trust, and potentially elder financial abuse under the Criminal Code of Canada. He said the pension redirection alone was a serious criminal matter. He said we needed to act before the condo sale closed. The condo sale was scheduled to close in 19 days. Dennis contacted the Nova Scotia Land Registry and filed an immediate notice of pending litigation, which effectively froze the sale while the matter was under investigation. Robert was not informed until the buyer's lawyer called his lawyer and the closing was halted. The morning Robert found out, he came home and told Patty it was all a misunderstanding, that someone had made an administrative error, that he was going to sort it out, that he was sorry she was upset, that he had always had her best interests at heart. He was very calm. He was very patient. He was still, even then, performing the version of himself he had built so carefully. Patty called me from the upstairs bathroom while he sat downstairs. She whispered, "He doesn't seem scared, Margaret. He still thinks he can fix this." I told her that he was scared. I told her scared people who have been doing this for a long time are very good at not looking scared. Dennis, working with Claire, had already filed a report with the Halifax Regional Police Financial Crimes Unit. Robert was interviewed 3 weeks later. His legal counsel advised him to cooperate. When investigators examined the financial records, the account where Patty's pension had been redirected, the investment account where the condo refinancing money had gone, the credit card accounts opened in her name, they found that the money had not been invested. It had been used. Gambling losses, primarily, tracked across several online platforms and 2 casino visits in Moncton. There was also evidence of transfers to a second individual, a man named Gary who turned out to be a longtime associate of Robert's, whose name appeared on 2 of the fraudulent credit card accounts as an authorized user. Robert was charged with fraud over $5,000, identity theft, and breach of fiduciary trust. Gary was charged with fraud and accessory to identity theft. Robert's bail conditions included no contact with Patty and surrender of his passport. Patty moved into my house on Roby Street 3 days after Robert was charged. She brought 2 suitcases, her good dishes, and a plant she had owned for 19 years that she absolutely refused to leave behind. Gerald accepted her immediately, which I chose to take as a sign that we were going to be all right. The legal process was not fast and it was not simple. I will not pretend otherwise. There were months of documents and statements and meetings with Dennis and hearings that were postponed and rescheduled. There were days when Patty sat at my kitchen table and stared at her tea and didn't say anything, and I sat with her and didn't say anything either, because some things can't be fixed with words, and the least I could do was be present. The pension provider reversed the direct deposit change and began issuing back payments for the 8 months of misdirected funds. This took 11 weeks and several formal letters from Dennis, but it happened. Patty received every cent she was owed. The condo refinancing was more complicated. Because Patty had technically signed the agreement even under the circumstances she had described, Dennis had to argue coercive control and exploitation of a vulnerable adult. In Nova Scotia, elder financial abuse provisions under the Adult Protection Act gave us additional grounds. The court agreed that the circumstances constituted exploitation. The lender was ordered to reverse the mortgage. Patty's condo was restored to her clear title. The $60,000 in credit card debt was another matter. Dennis worked with Equifax and the 3 credit card issuers to file fraud disputes. Because the cards had been opened without Patty's genuine informed consent, using her personal information without her knowledge, the issuers accepted the fraud claims. The accounts were closed. The debt was removed from her credit file. Robert pleaded guilty to 2 of the charges. He received a sentence of 4 years in a federal correctional institution, with parole eligibility at 2 years. His associate Gary received a suspended sentence and 3 years of probation. Many people, including Claire and Dennis, felt the sentences were inadequate given the totality of what had been done. I am one of those people. I spent 31 years in family law, and I will tell you honestly that the legal system does a poor job of treating financial and psychological abuse with the same seriousness as physical violence, even when the damage is just as real and just as lasting. But Robert is in a federal institution. Patty has her condo back. She has her pension. She has her credit restored. She has her life back. That is not nothing. She still lives with me on Roby Street. Not because she has to the condo as hers and she could move back tomorrow. She stays because, she says, she is not ready to be alone in that space yet, and because Tuesday lunches are back to every single week without fail, and because Gerald has adopted her as his primary person, and it would frankly be cruel to separate them at this point. She went back to therapy in January. Her therapist specializes in coercive control and financial abuse. Patty told me something she said in one of her sessions that I keep thinking about. She said her therapist told her that the goal of this kind of abuse is not to take someone's money, although that is what it looks like from the outside. The real goal is to take someone's certainty, their certainty in their own perceptions, their own memory, their own judgment. And that once someone has taken your certainty away, everything else becomes easy. I think about that often. I think about how Patty, who taught children for 34 years, who drove 4 hours in a snowstorm for a friend, who remembered every birthday, who waved at me at a bus stop like I was the most important person in the world, was made to doubt her own mind, deliberately and patiently, by a man who calculated, from the beginning, that she was worth more as a target than as a person. If you have a family member who has recently entered a new relationship later in life, I am not telling you to be suspicious of everyone. I am telling you to stay close. Keep the lunches. Make the calls. If something feels different, even something you cannot name, even something small, say something gently. And if someone you love begins to defer entirely to a new partner on financial matters, if they begin to seem confused about things they were always clear on, if they stop asking questions and start apologizing for not understanding, please do not wait as long as I did. Patty asked me recently if I felt guilty for not catching it sooner. I said yes. I told her the truth. She put her hand over mine on the table and she said, "You caught it when I finally let you." I am 64 years old. My sister is 61. We are having lunch on Tuesday. She is making her lemon squares, which are the best lemon squares I have ever eaten, and which she has been perfecting since 1979. Gerald will sit between us and beg shamelessly for attention that he doesn't need. We have time still. We have each other. That is, in the end, the only thing that matters.